the most brutal punishments of Qianlong. The Chinese criminal system was a brutal and unforgiving entity, feared by all who dared to break the law. From the infamous 1,000 cuts punishment to the use of psychological torture, Chinese emperors like Qianlong used a variety of methods to maintain their power and control over the kingdom. The sheer level of brutality was both shocking and compelling, leaving even the most hardened criminals begging for death. China's ancient history is filled with tales of power, intrigue, and shifting alliances. It was a time of great turmoil, where emperors and dynasties vied for control, and borders were in a constant state of flux. However, it was not just the politics of the era that were compelling. Punishment and torture were an integral part of the legal system, with brutal methods employed to extract confessions from those accused of crimes. Let's step into the world of ancient China and look into some of the most brutal punishments of Qianlong. Slow drip torture. The slow drip torture was a ghastly practice used by Qianlong, just like other Chinese emperors, to extract information and confessions from their victims. It involved a series of agonizing and prolonged procedures that would push the victims to their limits and beyond. The victim would be tied to a chair or a table, and then a slow and steady stream of water would be dripped onto their forehead. The drops of water would seem innocuous at first, but as time passed, the constant dripping would begin to take its toll on the victim. The sound of each drop hitting their forehead would become louder and more unbearable. The sensation of water trickling down their face would become maddening, and the victim's mind would start to play tricks on them. They would begin to hear voices, see hallucinations, and experience extreme paranoia. The process would continue for hours, days, or even weeks, depending on the severity of the crime and the determination of the interrogators. The victim would be denied food, water, and sleep, and the combination of physical and psychological torment would slowly break them down. The slow drip torture was an inhumane practice that was used to extract information and confessions from victims, often resulting in false accusations and wrongful convictions. The very thought of enduring such a prolonged and excruciating ordeal is enough to send shivers down one's spine. Amputation of limbs and genitals. The punishment of amputation of limbs and genitals was one of the most brutal forms of punishment carried out by Chinese emperors. The accused would be publicly stripped of their clothes and tied to a post or stake. Then, one by one, their limbs and genitalia would be severed from their body using a sharp blade. The pain inflicted upon the victim during amputation was excruciating and unimaginable. They would scream and writhe in agony as their limbs were brutally removed from their body. The loss of blood was immense, and the victim would often slip in and out of consciousness, only to be revived by the next cut. This form of punishment was not only meant to inflict physical pain, but also to shame and humiliate the victim. The act of severing the genitals was a clear message of emasculation and powerlessness, adding a deep psychological and emotional trauma to the already excruciating physical pain. The accused would often be left to die slowly from their injuries, adding to the horror and brutality of this punishment. The sight of such an execution would leave onlookers feeling a sense of terror and fear, ensuring that the power of the Chinese emperor was unquestioned and unchallenged. Wooden collar. The punishment of Kang was one of the cruelest and most dehumanizing forms of punishment employed by Chinese emperors. The accused would be forced to wear a wooden board around their neck that weighed up to 50 pounds and was so wide that the victim's arms could not touch their body. To publicly humiliate the criminal, his name, crime, and period of punishment were inscribed on the wooden collar. The victim was then paraded around the streets, forced to beg for food and water and endure extreme temperatures and weather conditions. It was not only a form of physical torture, but also psychological. As the accused person was cut off from their family and society, they would be left to sit in a designated public area where people would often throw stones and other objects at them. The punishment of Kang could last for weeks or even months, with the victim suffering from extreme hunger, thirst, and fatigue. In some cases, they would die of dehydration or malnutrition, while others would succumb to disease or infection due to their weakened state. The Kang punishment was a clear example of the sadistic and cruel nature of Chinese emperors, who used their power to inflict unimaginable suffering on those they deemed guilty of a crime. Death by 1,000 cuts. This was one of the most barbaric forms of punishment in human history. Death by 1,000 cuts, or Ling Qi, was a slow and excruciating execution method that was used in ancient China. The victim was stripped naked and tied to a post, and the executioner would then start making shallow cuts all over their body. The cuts were made in non-lethal areas, specifically chosen to prolong the suffering of the victim. The executioner would then proceed to slowly and deliberately slice off pieces of flesh from the victim's body, starting from the limbs and working their way toward the chest and abdomen. The victim was kept alive throughout the process and given water and medicine to extend their agony. The executioner took their time, enjoying every moment of the victim's prolonged suffering, which could last for hours, days, or even longer. The purpose of this horrific punishment was not only to cause immense physical pain, but also to shame and humiliate the victim and their family. The 1000th cut was the final and fatal blow, usually to the heart or by decapitation. Can you imagine the sheer terror and horror of this method of execution? It was intended to serve as a warning to anyone who dared to oppose the authority of the emperor. The cruelty of this punishment is beyond words, and it will forever remain as a testament to the merciless and inhumane nature of the ancient Chinese criminal justice system. The neck tower. The punishment of the Chinese neck tower was an unspeakably cruel and gruesome form of execution. The victim would be forced to wear a heavy wooden collar around their neck, which was fixed to a tall pole or beam. This meant that the victim was unable to move or lie down, and had to remain standing in one position for days or even weeks. As the days passed, the weight of the collar would become unbearable, causing the victim's neck to stretch and contort in unimaginable ways. The pain was excruciating, and the victim was often denied food or water, leading to dehydration and further suffering. But the agony didn't end there. The exposed neck and head of the victim became easy targets for insects, birds, and other animals, which would swarm around and feed on the victim's flesh. This added a layer of torment to an already unbearable punishment. The purpose of this punishment was not only to cause immense physical pain, but also to degrade and humiliate the victim in the eyes of the public. It was a warning to others of the power and cruelty of the Chinese emperor and the consequences of disobeying their authority. The neck tower was a slow and agonizing death, and those who were unlucky enough to be subjected to it would endure unspeakable suffering until their final breath. Under the rule of Chinese emperors, including Qianlong, China has witnessed the most gruesome torture methods to keep its citizens in line. Thanks for watching the video. If you liked the video, check out other historical videos on our channel. Don't forget to click the bell icon so that you don't miss out on such interesting topics.